Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back to From the Ground Up podcast. Thank you guys so much for being here and listening to my voice. It's been a little bit, so I appreciate your patience waiting for me to get around and put out another podcast for you guys. What I would like for you to do, if you could, it would be really sweet if you checked out portcitypet.com, have some substrates available as well as some animals. If you don't mind waiting around for some proper shipping conditions, it's been kind of hit or miss. I was able to ship out a few animals tonight, which just snuck it in there. So there's always a chance, so feel free to check it out and see what animals I have available. Other than that, check out Focus Cubed Habitats. So they are just coming up with new ways every single day to change the way we look at reptile keeping and change the way that we look at reptile enclosures. I think like they can't get any better looking, and then they come out with new enclosures all the time. Like, say, if you're watching video right now, this really awesome blue and black enclosure that they made, as well as check out this black with red splatter. It looks like blood, almost like American Psycho, if you're familiar. Really, really cool stuff they have. And Ashley and Steven are great people. So check them out. Check out Focus Cubed Habitats on all the social medias, focuscubedhabitats.com. Other than that, that's what we have for you. I am excited to bring our guest. I was on his podcast, which is the LED Cast, so go check that out. The link is going to be in the description. I was on it earlier this month. He is an author, a business owner, a podcaster, like I said, journalist, Cesar Torres. Welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here.
Of course. So can you fill in some of the gaps that I may have missed with that intro? Give us a quick overview of who you are and what you do.
Thank you. You covered almost everything except for a magician. So we'll fill in that gap.
Whoa.
No, that's just about right. My history is grounded in writing. I mean, I think everything I've ever done in my life came from books, reading, and a lifetime as an adult of being a journalist. But something happened in my adulthood where I just went down the road less traveled. And so I have since my 30s and 40s, and 46 now, published 7 of my own books. I have 2 more coming out, science fiction and fantasy. And I spun off a clothing brand called LED Queens. That's why people call me LED, right? LED Queens. And that came out of the books. It's fitness clothing. It tends to be a brand that's mostly magnetizing for LGBTQ folks, but it's open to everybody. And I think the magic part is that I think that everything I've done has kind of that through line. I think curiosity for life, curiosity for books, and knowledge it informs everything that I do. So that's about it. Oh, I'm a cosplayer too because of my books. We forgot about that one.
There you go. And I think that there's a lot of overlap, especially with snake people and just having curiosity and having different hobbies. I think we all have different hobbies. There's probably plenty of people who are into like cosplay, plenty of people who are into fitness. Snake people tend to have other hobbies. So can you tell us a little bit of what got you interested in snakes? Because I know that you're a new snake owner.
Yeah. And for me, the story with snakes really starts from boyhood, but not the way that most of your listeners would expect. I was born and raised in Mexico City. So everything about my roots, my heritage, my ethnicity, and my race comes from Mexico. And as you know, the history of that country is centuries and centuries old. It goes back to the Mayas and the Aztecs. So when I was growing up, when you go to school, when you live in that country, there's such a wealth of knowledge about the Mayas, the Aztecs, the Toltecs, and snakes are a huge part of their mythology. They are sacred animals, holy animals, right? But because I was raised Catholic and just grew up in the Western modern world, upper middle class, like it was just something that you just thought of, oh, well, that's just the mythology. But as a boy, I was obsessed, not just by that mythology, but also Nordic mythology, which has, the Ouroboros, that snake, Medusa from Greek legend. I just was way into that. I even had dreams. I've had many dreams about like Medusa and snakes, and they're not scary dreams. But I have to be honest with you, I never permitted myself to think that I could actually have one. And that's because we grew up without pets. Most of us in my family, I think, are allergic to at least cat dander, but something like a snake seemed like a far reach. So I never even bothered to ask. On TV, there was a really, really famous entertainer back in the 70s and 80s in Mexico. So this is nothing that anybody would have ever seen here. But her name was Olga Brinsky, and she was a really voluptuous woman, really beautiful, who would play the violin on like variety shows. So on the Sunday variety shows where you'd have all the pop stars and whatever, she would come on there and play her violin. But she was famous not just for being voluptuous and a great musician, but she would come out very scantily clad with a boa constrictor, and this was like her thing. She brought it out. So all these images, it was just all around me, and I just thought that they were super cool animals. But I swear to you, I never allowed myself to think, yes, you can have one, until the pandemic arrived. When the pandemic hit, as many of us can, sort of confirm, the emotional impact, the mental aspect of what was happening, the shock, the actual sheer shock of like this situation around the world, really just, it hit me to the core. And I live alone. I don't have pets. So I thought, this is just it. I'm just going to be living alone for a long time. But just like my books and just like mythology and prophecies and things like that, I would stay up really late at night in February, March, April, and May, watching channels like yours, like your YouTube channel, Snake Discovery, and some other really great channels that are out there. And I was obsessed, almost hypnotized by the way that handling looked on there. And I just suddenly desired a snake so badly, not knowing at all how to have one. Like I knew zero about it. I finally got the courage in May. I actually ordered, the Sterilite, a tub, because I had watched some videos that recommended that for babies anyway. And I got it just for myself. I was like, I'll just hold on to it because maybe one day I'll get a snake. And about mid-June, one day I just had it in me. I was like, there's a great reptile shop here in Chicago. That's the only thing they do is reptiles. I just went down there to look just to see what the prices would be. And I walked out with my first snake, which is a corn snake. So it really was like dreams, books, and sort of like these, visionary images of snakes that just got me to this point. I know it sounds very, very, very magical, but it worked. It was.
Yeah, and I mean, for a fantasy writer, I guess that makes a lot of sense. And I know that snakes have been in your books as well.
Yeah, for anybody that wants to check them out and you want to see them at play, my book 13 Secret Cities is book one in a whole series that I write that is dystopian science fiction that features the Aztec gods. But in that book, there is a gigantic snake, probably the size of a skyscraper, which is hard to imagine. But it is made completely out of like a black substance. So it is like a Mexican black king snake. Imagine that. But the size of a house. And it's actually one of the most important and benevolent characters in the book. So as scary as it looks, because it actually has 4 eyes instead of 2, it's actually one of the most interesting creatures in there. So if you like things like Pan's Labyrinth and Godzilla, you're going to love that snake. But it's not the only one. There's 3 more coming in the next book in the series, because there's just giant snakes everywhere.
And snakes are obviously at the forefront of your mind right now. What made you think of or pick a corn snake in particular?
Well, I guess what people call these kinds of people today in the last 20 years is like being a nerd or a geek. But I just consider myself a reader. So ever since I was a boy, I was just a deep, longtime reader. I was absorbed by libraries and books. So what I did this spring, as I was starting to watch these YouTube channels, I also did a lot of reading. And the pattern that came up the most was that between ball pythons and corn snakes, they were, interchangeable in terms of being good beginner snakes. And I was actually thinking I was going to get a ball python. That was actually my first choice. But then I dug just a little deeper into especially some of the channels, such as yours and some of the other ones I mentioned. And it just seemed like I should go for the easiest. And at first they didn't appeal to me in terms of like how they look as much, because I thought that the ball pythons had a cooler look. But now I feel very differently. I think corn snakes have such amazing shape, the head of the shape, the way that they are a little thinner. I like that. And so I just went with what was recommended. I mean, what you're going to hear from me a lot is I just follow what is recommended because I really don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think that's something that's awesome as far as a perspective from a new snake keeper like that. And knowing kind of your limits and what you want to do. And kind of obviously you did a lot of research. So honestly, if you could have kept a ball python if you wanted to, let's be honest.
Looking back now, I could have, yeah. Or even what else would be something? I think I would even be bold enough to get like a hognose or even a bull snake. And I think it helps everybody. It helps that I'm single. I don't have children. I don't have other pets. So I'm able to focus a lot of energy and time into one single animal. I think that's helped me a lot.
And as a new person coming into the hobby, like how do you filter out information? Because I know there's a lot of information out there. Like how did you pick and choose where you got your information from?
Well, that was really hard. I think with things that are written, Google was helpful because it ranks the quality of some of the information, but there has been an interesting dynamic. I think in the last 20 years, some of the best information on the hobby is actually on YouTube video, maybe even Instagram and Facebook groups to some extent, which, we'll talk about those. But what used to be something where I would have gone to the library and gotten lots of books about corn snakes or ball pythons, those don't really exist. They're not being written as much as you would think. All the best information truly is living on the internet. And so to filter it out, I think it helps me that I've worked as an editor and journalist for years. After a while, you can get a sense of what content is there to, I hate to say it, to be provocative and sensational. And that's the content I walk away from. I usually try to go towards what seems to be maybe a little more boring, but more facts oriented. And that's kind of the pattern I follow. And it's not a specific channel or a specific Facebook group or anything like that, but you can sort of tell sometimes when something is just so controversial that maybe it's best to walk away from it and look for the information somewhere else. Because then sometimes it does confirm it, or sometimes it negates it. But for example, like deciding between a tub and a tank, like a glass tank. For me, I went towards the biology. All the best information about the biology of snakes, just how, they like to be in wet places that are really dank and that they don't move. Like out in the wild, I mean, they're gonna move, of course, right? But they really love to rest. And I think for most young, or not young, but new snake keepers, that's information we have to actually like pass through and actually understand it, that they're not going to be like hamsters or bunnies or dogs. Like they love just chilling in a little dark hole. And I think what I saw is a lot of like young or new keepers refuse to sort of see that. They want the animal to be pleasing to them or to have habits that are, accustomed to the human. But my perspective on snakes has always been, especially now that I have one, is we have to respect their biology. And they're not here to entertain us or to be accessories. Like we have to kind of just create a good home. So I bought the tub and I think it was a good choice. I'm already going to be upgrading into a tank this year. But for starting out with a baby, it made things really easy for me. I've never had any issues with sheds or feeding. So it's all subjective. Take it with a grain of salt, but deleting some of that controversial information actually helped me more, to be honest.
Yeah. And I think that's something in which people may not realize. You just look at who has the most subscribers, who has the most views.
Right.
And oftentimes that's going to be the more entertaining and therefore the more sensational and the less, unfortunately, like, we have to be dry. I mean, my channel's pretty dry. Let's be honest. There's nothing sensational or fun about it. And I'll admit that. Someone like Emily from Snake Discovery does a much better job of being a little bit more personable and a little bit more fun and entertaining, but at the same time, completely informational and correct.
And I think she's a rarity too. I think she's figured out how to bring something out of herself to be entertaining for the camera. But I think what's very clear is like, she's just a person who's in deep in the knowledge. But then there's other great channels too, where I just feel like, you just have to pay a lot of attention. You cannot skim through these videos and just expect to go, oh, here we go, problem solved. Often one situation or one fact leads to another. and you just have to put it together yourself. And I think what helped me was being willing to experiment a little bit with my setup, to try to figure out what the actual animal wants, what they need. I think that was really, like, the first time I fed the snake, I was terrified. And people handle the babies all the time, and they're literally babies. But it was one of the scariest things I've done in my life. I didn't know what to expect out of feeding it a pinky, So all that stuff helped. I just think, if anybody is sort of like myself, if you're new to the hobby, just take your time. Take your time absorbing as much content as you can, even if you have to wait a year or however long. You're better off with more information than with less.
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of like you said, it's all going to be an adjustment also as far as what works in your home, what works where you live. All those different things, the area of your house will change everything. And one of the things that I want to mention is that there are a few good books, even though I think to the layman, it's not going to look as appealing because these books are probably 20 years old at this point.
Right.
But if you want to look up, Kathy Love has a good corn snake book, as well as Don Soderberg has a good corn snake book. But we also need to be realistic. 90% of the new keepers are not going to go out and buy a book first thing. It's a lot easier to watch a few YouTube videos and maybe look at a few blog articles or something like that.
Yeah, that's just the hard reality of it now, because I would actually prefer to read a book. If I could, redo it in some way where there were more books, I would just read books for 6 months and then get the steak. But, video is powerful. And so are podcasts. I heard of a few podcasts too, but there's just a lot of, contradictory information. You really could look at almost anything about the hobby and find a contradiction in it. And so, luckily nothing bad has happened to, my animal, but I know some people have horror stories from things they tried or just not knowing. But, I'll just say it again, as much as I'm into science fiction and fantasy, and that's what I write, magic and monsters and mythology, my belief in science runs so deep. Anytime I'm in doubt about what's happening, I just ask myself, what does the science have to say about this? And then that usually makes me calm down and helps me find more resources that kind of confirm that. So, yeah.
And that's something that has changed over probably I believe our hobby started very science-based. Mm-hmm. And then we started getting into very breeding, what made it convenient for the breeder. And therefore we kind of got away from science-based information when keeping the animal. And then all of a sudden we're seeing it come back in different ways. So, that's a great perspective as far as a lot of times we are looking at what's cheapest, most efficient, because you're being taught by breeders. That's something I could also fall into as far as accidentally giving people information in which you could definitely do more for your animal than a breeder does, because I need to keep 200 of something. You're keeping one thing in your house. Okay. So it's also, you could do more, you could do less, as long as you stay within the guidelines, as long as you stay within your temperature, your humidity, and you care about the animal and its well-being. I think you're good to go.
Yeah, I can see it now. I can also see how the budget ramps up very quickly for this, if you want to take that more sort of exciting route to give it more, in terms of habitat or whatever. And so that's kind of where my scope is at. I actually just like people have to think about children, and trust me, I'm not a fan of people who call their pets like their babies or their kids. Can I swear on this podcast? Yeah. Fuck that. I don't hate people. I hate the statements of that's my little boy, no, it's an animal I respect a lot, male or female, it's tons of respect. But at the same time, I'm already planning, just as if I was maybe a biological parent of a human, how much room is there in my life from this point until maybe the time I die to take care of one of these or two or three really well? Because people get addicted, right? And I already have talked to you, Joe. I'm I already want another one. But I've really been trying to look at it, and it's not so much budget per se. It's much more of that attention that can go to the animal's life. Or if something happens to me, are there people that are in backup who can adopt it or whatever? And I'm okay, if they live 20 plus years, What would make sense right now, what makes sense to me is like maximum 3, but it should probably just be 1 or 2, for me to do it the way I want. And so I think talking to other experts, breeders, other owners, I think that's really helpful because everybody has a different perspective. And I love everybody's perspective. Some people want to have 300, good for you. Some people only want to have 5, great for you too. But for me, I haven't decided. I think 2 seems very possible. So that's probably what I'll just stick with for a little while. I haven't bought a second one. I'm still working on corn snake. Yeah.
No, it's great to see the thoughtfulness there. And I think a lot of times people go from 1 to 10 to 20. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, if you're like us, if you live alone, if you have, who knows what can happen? You have COVID for 2 weeks and you don't have the energy to take care of the animals. You need someone who can come over and take care of them, or who knows what happens. You go on vacation, all different types of things. It ends up affecting your life. Trust me, like my animals run my life a lot of the times at this point.
And, if you go on vacation, it's not as simple as just having somebody feed your dog. Like some people are so afraid of these animals. It has to be a certain relative or friend who can literally come over and maybe give it a feeding or whatever, or to just put water in there. Some people are too afraid to just change out the water if you're on vacation. So I've thought a lot about it. And, then there's the unknown. That's the other part of the hobby and just life, that things can go wrong or things can change. And so who knows, maybe I'll get married next year to some man of my dreams and then have the budget for 10 animals. Who knows? We don't know.
Oh, is he rich?
I don't know. I haven't met him yet. If you're listening, I got to meet you.
So let's talk a little bit about like growing up, business, all of that stuff. So you were born in Mexico City. When did you come over to the States?
Just when I was about to enter puberty, so age 12. And we already had some family here, like my grandparents lived here, but all the family is Mexican. And the thing I'm just always very lucky and proud of is that growing up, we grew up with both languages. Even in Mexico, we spoke English at home so that we would, get both. And my parents sent us to schools where they taught us in English in Mexico. So the adaptation here wasn't so much with language, but it was a lot of culture shock both ways, right? Because I just wasn't used to the discrimination, feeling so different than anyone else. And then on top of it, at that age, what was happening is I was realizing that I was different in this other way that's more universal, which is, I was gay. And so those years were really interesting, but I don't have horror stories about it. I mean, I think it's every young person goes through a really hard time between ages of like 13 and 22. And so as an adult, I've tried to give some of that back with what I do, because I do see young people, whether they're LGBTQ or people of color or just people who feel different, that they struggle with this even more than what I did. And so I just, everything that I do, my books, when I stream on Twitch, everything in my life is hopefully giving them the sense that, oh, I can do that too. Because I was just lucky. I think I had great parents who provided like a really safe environment to become myself, right? So that was those years. And I went to college here in Chicago, in Evanston. So I went to Northwestern University for journalism. And then after that, I've lived several places. I lived in Chicago for many years. I live here now, but I lived in New York, Japan, Ireland. And that's another thing I feel very lucky that I've been able to see the world and then learn from those experiences and bring them back here.
What was it like living in Japan? How did that come about?
Japan. So I had a really good job. I don't know if you remember this, but Encyclopedia Britannica had this great idea in the late 90s that they were going to be like the next big .com. So they set up the whole encyclopedia on the web. This was before Google arrived. And they were like, we will be the search engine that everybody in the world will use, not knowing that Google was, making it way better. So they hired a lot of talented people. And just like the bubble burst back in those days, there were layoffs at the end of that time there. And so It was run very poorly. And just like you hear the horror stories of, oh, we found out about the layoffs like the morning of, literally, they laid off everybody and they had like secret meetings and then they laid you off. And at that time, I had already, I don't know what was getting into me, but I got this idea that I wanted to go on the JET program, which is sponsored by the Japanese government. And you can go and get sponsored to teach in the public schools English. And that was, I don't know if it was that I was worried about this job and the internet and the dot-com bubble. But anyway, as soon as I got laid off, I also got the acceptance letter to go on JET. So off I went. And I went in 2001, and it was life-changing. It's a hard place to live. I know people have this romantic idea of like, you go there and as a foreigner, you get treated like a king. You do. But now that especially so many more people are attuned to notions of like discrimination and racism, like you go through it a lot in Japan, it just feels different because of how the culture works. So they'll always treat you like a king, you know, and everybody in Japan, I had the time of my life. I really love that place. I'll gladly go back. But also it's constantly, the culture constantly reminds you that you will never be part of Japan. You can't get citizenship. You'll never speak the language the way that everybody speaks it. Those things, you know, neither place is worse or better, but those things were hard because I was like, you know what? I'm dealing with a lot in the United States with these very same topics of like immigrants and racism and who speaks what. And here in Japan, it was still just as intense, but maybe more isolating, Joe, because I was just there with some of the other, you know, foreign teachers who were there on the program. And so there weren't a lot of resources to be like, hey, you know what? I feel a little left out of certain things sometimes. Like you just couldn't do it. You just have to like absorb it and keep it to yourself. But through and through, if I could do it again, I would stay even longer. You just can't get citizenship. They just will not let you do that, or even like long-term visas. You know, they're really difficult to get. But it taught me a lot, and I think it taught me also to break away from expectations of my career. Because when I did that, I had been working as an editor for so long. I thought, oh, am I going to ruin my career by becoming an English teacher in Japan? And that didn't happen. And in fact, it was one of the best things I ever did.
So is that as far as like career changes and stuff like that? I mean, I've worked so many different jobs. And,
right.
I mean, it seems as though you can always kind of go back. You took your chance, but then how did you end up coming back? Did you come back to the States from there?
Came back to the States, and I did have, you know, my career and my vocation to fall back on, because when I came back, I got a phone call from a former editor from Chicago Tribune, you know, which is where I used to work right out of school. And they were like, oh, we're starting up a new project here. They had just purchased a Spanish language newspaper, like a chain. And they were converting their content into the CMS that Chicago Tribune had. So they said, we need like an executive producer who can help us just, you know, bring it to life. And you worked here before. And suddenly I was in, and I needed to work. At the moment when I came back, I almost thought I should just go to another country and be an English teacher. But my family's here and the stability was good. So I ended up going back into journalism. And I stayed there until 2016. Not at that job, but in journalism through then. So I don't know what to tell you. It just, words keep pulling me back in.
And it seems like some of the things that you were kind of ostracized for, whether it be, you know, being from Mexico, being bilingual helps you get into that position and get that job that you ended up getting.
Yeah, that's the irony. I think that, you know, just like anybody else who's part of a minority or a marginalized group, you know, I have my own politics. I have my own rage, because I have like rage about what happens in this country. But at the same time, as much as we feel any rage, the world is changing. Like the way this country works is more diverse. There are more voices. And in some ways, there have been more opportunities. Like that wasn't possible even a decade before when I got that invite to be part of that project. And even what I do today, I have a space in being a book author, promoting my books, my clothing line, that there just weren't conversations around that. And you couldn't get to those customers in that particular way. So I try to always stay focused on it, because we see time passing as like, I mean, some of us see it as like, oh, it's just things are getting worse and worse. But in fact, a few things have improved. It's just that, there's always going to be one more hurdle for the culture to get over. And so I'm always wanting for the best stuff to happen to everybody and for just equality to exist for all. But that helped me a lot. And it continues to help me today, because I never expected to market my products to LGBTQ people. This is going to shock some people, because they'll look at my store, they'll look at my TikToks, and they'll be like, wow, you're so good at speaking to, LGBTQ people. And I never actually really wanted to do that when I started my own business. I actually just wanted to make stuff that the whole world would appreciate. But we've talked a little bit about marketing, you and I. Once you go into marketing, you have to define that audience, and that was my best audience. Yeah.
And can we go back a little bit? Because I think, as for me, like, I have a 9-to-5 job. I have a regular job that I actually enjoy. Sure. But a lot of people, the whole story is like, I work this 9-to-5 corporate job that's soul crushing, and I want to break out of it. I want to break free. Did you feel like that?
Yes. So, I mean, you're really uncovering, like, you're unpacking all my history. This is
this too revealing?
No, this is good, because you're kind of like finding all the gaps in there. Because sometimes people, you see somebody on a podcast or on YouTube, and you go, wow, it's always been smooth and an easy journey to the top or to wherever they are. But no, when I was in my mid-30s, this is when, I had been pulled back into journalism. I switched to healthcare journalism for a little while. So I went from Chicago Tribune to healthcare. I worked for two big healthcare organizations here. One's a hospital, one's a big nonprofit, very famous. And I swear to you, those were some of the most miserable years of my life. And I made a great paycheck. I mean, my paychecks were awesome. I had like money to just go on vacation, and I had a condo, I bought a condo. But it just goes to show that money actually isn't always the answer. I was miserable, and eventually it started showing through in my performance in one of those jobs. And I think most people are too embarrassed to actually talk about that. But for the first time around the age 33, 34, I got one bad performance review, like, in my job. And I'm the kind of person who, always got straight A's, whatever. And, when that first happens to you, you go, oh no, it must be my manager's fault. He or she is after me, or this other person, didn't do the job right. You start blaming people. We all go through it. I did it. But as time went on, and in retrospect, the problem was me. The problem was me, because that place was not for me. Like, what they did was good stuff. The content was fine, but my heart was not in the team or with what they did. And so that was a really rough time, because if you're a person that is team focused, and people are meeting me, I'm very sociable. I want to help people out, make teams, be harmonious. Nothing was working. And what I needed to do was to walk away and change. So that was once. And then I went through it again. It actually happened again just about 5 years ago in New York. I was an editor in New York. So I kept on moving up the ladder to bigger and better jobs. I was an executive editor in New York for Wirecutter, which is part of the New York Times now. And I went through a period that looked very different. By then I was managing a lot of people, a lot of responsibility. We were about to be acquired by the New York Times. And I ran myself into the ground, because I had learned some of the lessons from before. And I did love the organization. I love the people. But something else internally needed to change for me to move ahead. And that change actually needed to be for me to walk away and kick off my own business. And so I think what do you call that? The moral of the story is that I think that if we ever expect to be good at anything, whether it's career or vocation, you do have to be willing to go through a lot of pain and struggle, because these moments of doubt, when you ask yourself, am I the right person for this job? Am I good enough for this? Is my team, worth giving them all my energy. We go through this all the time, and there's no easy answers. The thing is, you just have to pay attention to yourself. Usually your intuition is telling you very early what to do. Like the one job, like the healthcare jobs, very early on, my intuition was like, you don't like working here. Mm-hmm. And I did not pay attention to it for almost 5 years. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's how deluded we are. But there was a sentence in my head that I was always like, you don't want like working here. And yet I did. So I don't know.
Dude, it's so because obviously, like, I think I just went through my first period of that. I've had plenty of jobs where I knew that I hated and stuff that I was doing that I hated. But I had like 3 to 4 years where I was just lying to myself.
Right.
And also looking externally and saying, this is not happening for me. That's happening, to me. And it's always kind of you and your attitude, or maybe it's you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or
it is because when it's on, you don't have to think twice about that stuff. Even when there's difficult people or obstacles, you just keep jumping over them. But when those things happen, and when we are less mature, you always think, oh, it's the outside world. It's pressing in on me. It's another person. It's their bad intentions. And there are people with bad intentions, but honestly, they're often not thinking about you. That's the thing. That's what I discovered. They're not thinking about me at all. And I was the one that just needed to make the changes. And that stuff is so painful. I just think most people aren't willing to talk about it, because it happens whether you stay at a job or you leave. Like, but I didn't want to be like that, which is why I'm sitting here now doing something else.
Yeah. And I mean,
for me, sometimes people, you manage people. Sometimes people quit. They go, oh, it's my time to move on, or this. And I've learned, if they ever say, oh, I'm having a problem, or I'm burnt out, or maybe it's not right for me, I never try to like pull them back in or force them to do things they don't want. They don't want to do it, and it's not right for them. I would rather that they, fly and go somewhere where they really feel at home. So, yeah.
See, I've only known you for a short period of time. And in that period of time, the thing that I take away from who you are is that you are unapologetically yourself. So it's hard for me to think that you were someone who is crammed in a box, in an office somewhere in a job that you hated. How the hell do you get the guts to do that kind of a thing? And just like you're flexing half naked on Instagram, man. Like I couldn't even, I would never have the guts to do something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you where it comes from. I mean, now we're getting deeper into some of the stuff that really connects what I think I do and, things I read. But Carl Jung, one of the most famous psychologists ever, almost as famous as Freud, one of his big concepts was the shadow. That once you get into adulthood, not childhood and not being a teenager, but adulthood, the shadow becomes the most important thing you have to work on. And the shadow is basically the thing you don't ever want to see in yourself. And it doesn't mean negative or bad. For some people, the shadow is like being a loving person or affectionate, truly. And for some other people, it means maybe being more extroverted or more delineating more boundaries, right? But I think for me, if you were to look at me in those years when I was in those like more formal jobs, and especially when I was a boy, like teenager and just out of school, I was basically the person who always did the things that you were supposed to do. In school, like somebody's always like, hey, do you have the answer to this one? Or did you do the homework? I was the kid that always did the homework. And we do these things when we're kids, because that's how we learn to survive the world, even to survive our parents. As much as we love our parents, our relationship when we're little with them is to just stay safe and not upset them. Because if we upset them, then we don't feel loved, right? So I just did everything by the book. And of course, that's part of me. It's how I still do a lot of things, right? But what I realized in my adulthood, once these crises started in the 30s, is that there's parts of me that are more, they used to feel very foreign, like who is that person? And I've let them come through now. And what's happened is, especially with social media and promoting my platform for people, is that there is this other, it's almost like another person who kind of came through, like an extra dimension. And the more I let that come through and stay mindful, don't let it get to your head or whatever, the more adjusted I feel. As a book author, and especially the person that I am, I never wanted or thought, I'll need to like show myself physically to promote my books or my products. In my mind, I was always going to be behind an opaque surface, kind of like a snake in the hide, right? I'll never have to come out because my work will just be seen by everybody. People will just read my books and they'll go, who is that person who wrote that? And things don't work like that now, especially in the last 20 years. You have to have this big internet presence. And so I've let that kind of come through a lot more. And even as it comes to Instagram, by the time I was kicking off LED Queens, which is the line of clothing that I make, I had already I had been a runner and a triathlete for years since I was in my 20s, but I was a casual triathlete, which means, and people who listen to this podcast, if you're a triathlete or runner or marathoner, most marathoners and triathletes, they just have like average looking bodies. You do the events, you do the cycling and you want to look good. But like, I kind of look like skinny fat, if people know what that is. I was classically skinny fat. And I always wondered, I was like, well, shouldn't I look better? Because, I just did a half marathon and like an Olympic length triathlon, but it wouldn't happen. And then I got a little bit more into weightlifting. I made a switch into powerlifting and things like that. But I think that was a discovery that also was something that I was cutting myself off from. So to go back to childhood, and when you're a professional in the United States, a lot of the culture, if you talk to a lot of white collar people, people who work corporate and whatever, which I was for a while, the things they always are is it's always running. They always do cycling, CrossFit lately. And the other stuff that people do, which would be bodybuilding, powerlifting, I guess there's a distinction. People associate that with being kind of like a meathead or being working class.
Certainly not intellectual, right?
Intellectual, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know when that happened, when the switch flipped, but I was like, why am I following those stupid rules? I mean, I love running. I love triathlon. I never want to do it differently. But once I went deeper down the rabbit hole of weightlifting, I was like, they're all the same thing. They're all like great for the body, different results. But that was something that also kind of, you talk about becoming more of myself. If I had stayed a runner up until this age, I would actually be doing a disservice to myself, because I think what I actually love more is creating shape, bodybuilding, all this stuff. And to go to the brand real quick, that's a decision I also understood when I kicked off making gym gear for men. I was like, I cannot be presenting myself to the world on the internet as the owner of this brand without at least having a shape. I don't need to be cut or look like, like I'm on stage for a bodybuilding show, but I need to look like this really, because it is my passion, right? Mm-hmm. So those were more, bridges I have to cross, and they still happen every day. I'm doing things every day where I'm like, oh, I'm putting myself out there too much. But if I'm doing it from the heart, it works. If it's false, then those things always fall flat.
Yeah, I think the big thing is being aligned, right? I think we've all seen snake, even in the snake space, you see people who have YouTube channels, and then the people who have been around for a little bit are like, that's not a real snake guy. Yeah, right.
And it's people say things like, "Oh, stay in your lane" and things like that. I mean, I think staying in your lane for all your life is too limiting. You should try other things. But to speak to other things as if you're an authority on them, like, I really can't. So when it comes to snake keeping, I'm a brand new snake keeper. I read a lot, but ultimately I don't have answers for that. I'm not on your show to be an expert on being a brand new snake keeper. But things where like it falls squarely into my area of passion, those things do happen to take off. One of the things I did with COVID also was, we're talking developing business ideas and business plans. I knew my business plan had to be tweaked because of people not going to gyms, right? And I'm still working on that, but I started early. Like even in February, I was like, oh, we have to move quick. And at the time I thought, oh, you know what I'll do is I'll create a lot of educational content that is free for the customers when they purchase the product. So in other words, if you buy a pair of gym tights from me, you will get a sequence of 10 emails with like fitness tips and nutrition stuff just for free, kind of like a course, just through, just from being a customer. I started working on that, and I even, had like an editorial partner who was helping me with that, a personal trainer. But I don't know, like if it wasn't meant to be, or if my heart wasn't in it, or maybe it was just the conditions. It just didn't like gel. It just wasn't going where I needed it to. And then at the same time, I was experimenting with TikTok, marketing my products on TikTok. And so I'm marketing, and people, if you visit ledqueens.com, our famous, like our flagship product is men's gym tights in all these different colors. So I was out making TikToks, just thinking I'm just going to promote them the way I do on Instagram, so talk about it, like, flex a little bit, whatever. And, this was still part of like trying to evolve the business in the COVID life. But I did one TikTok about a video game that I feel very passionate about, which is Overwatch. And that one was the TikTok that took me out of what my customers wanted. And it was like a whole new audience. It was like LGBTQ kids who love Overwatch. Suddenly that TikTok, that one single one, it's not a lot, but it has like, I think like 80,000 views still, just for like 15 seconds. And it took me into this other place where now I haven't really figured out how it fits into the business plan, but LED Queens isn't just about products, it's about services. And for me lately, those services are for underrepresented communities, which is LGBTQ gamers. Like the whole industry and the communities, they're very toxic no matter what. Even if you're straight, they're toxic. And I think I have found a place in there, but I couldn't be in that space talking to these young people about these video games if I didn't love video games. That's the whole point. If I was faking it and being like, well, I guess I'll start marketing to the kids because they seem to like video games, I should be shot out of the water. I should just be gone. But this one falls squarely in there. And that's also the challenge, because I didn't get an MBA and I'm not like, I didn't start selling my own stuff at a young age. My challenge as a business owner is, how do I take those passions and make them part of a true business plan that scales? I still don't have the answers for that either. So,
and I think that is a great lesson, though, as far as you're putting stuff out there. And when something hits, you don't just say like, oh, that's not really me. You're trying to figure out a way to make it work. Plus, you are kind of trying to find a way for it to be you, but yes, at the same time, give the people what they want. And I think that that's really hard, because a lot of times when we're passionate about something, we're a little bit too much into maybe the corners of it. And maybe I really like Amazon tree boas, and I'm like, why doesn't everyone love these things? And you're just trying so hard to make everyone love it. And like, no, man, you kind of have to think about what the people want at the same time. You can't make people want something.
Books are the same way. I mean, I don't write books just based on like what a commenter leaves on Amazon. But at the same time, there have been some things that you can tell that's what the audience wants. In my case, they want, it's sort of like Narnia or like Middle Earth. You go through a portal and you go into Mictlan, which is the underworld of the Aztecs, but it's full of magical creatures. And again, they're gigantic, whatever. And the way I write, I didn't necessarily want to write sequels that were always going back in there. But I realized very quickly, you just, even just from talking to the readers, it's like, that's what they want. They want more monsters, more of that dissent in there. So that's one great example. Another great example is rainbows. This might also shock other people who go, oh my God, don't all LGBTQ people love rainbows? I don't love the rainbow. I mean, I love rainbows. I love rainbow as in terms of like the prisms, from science. Right. But designing with rainbows is really difficult to get it right. And like year 3 into having my business, I was getting so many requests from people saying, when are you going to make Pride designs? Because what they wanted was to wear my stuff in June or whenever Pride is in their city with rainbows. But it was like getting punched in the face. I was like, this is not what the designer wants to do. This designer does not like rainbows. And yet I had to figure out a way to design with them to satisfy myself and them. And I went in that direction, and they've been very successful. Those are still really successful designs. And even now with streaming, there's other games I play that I've streamed, but the number one and number two games are that give me the most subscriptions and views are these two games, especially Overwatch, which is a very stale game. It's been out for 5 years. The sequel isn't coming out yet. And yet it's what's made me relevant in this community. So I try to really follow my nose with that. And that is, I guess, the business side of it, like go to what the audience wants. But in my case, I get so wrapped up in it. Sometimes I have to pull myself back and go, you got to think even more like a business person. And that's hard. I think I'm more wired like an artist with a good chunk of business person there.
Yeah, an artist is great until you have to pay rent, and then all of a sudden you're a business person, like
if you're an artist that does it for a living, you have to think like it's a job. And so these young kids who are part of my community, they talk to me because they go, I want to be a big streamer. And I'm not a big streamer. I only have like 500 followers, whatever. But they see the big people and they go, I want to do that. I want to do that. And I tell them, I'm like, as fun as it may look to you, that they're sitting there playing video games, and getting lots of money, it is a job. You have to shower for the job. You have to show up on time. You can never miss a day. It is work. And if anybody wants to be a novelist, same thing. I write even when I don't feel like it, or even if I don't feel great, I still have to sit my butt down and get it done.
So have you read Stephen Pressfield? I believe it's called The War of Art. And then he calls that the resistance, in which he talks about writing in particular. He's a writer. And basically, he needs to set a time. He needs to go to work. He goes to work and he forces himself to write. Yeah, it seems all nice and great to be a writer and do what you love, but some days you got to do it when you don't want to do it.
That's how it is. That's how it is in this house. And it's like I have to talk to myself and be like, I don't care what you want. Like, you're going to sit down and do it. And for me, it's mornings. That's when emails aren't too stressful. I'm not getting too many customer service issues. Like, the morning time is my time to get it out of the way. 1 or 2 hours. I don't write all day. I write like maximum 2 hours.
And I guess to go back, something that I totally skipped over, like, how did you settle on singlets? Like, how is that even a thing? It's something that, how do you even think about that?
Yeah. Well, singlets came before the tights. I guess we're telling the story of LED Queens, but I think almost every question you've asked me, it still goes back to the books. I have 2 book series. So one is called The Coil, and that's the one that has all these Aztec monsters in it. The 3rd book is about to come out. And that one is like, if you took a Blade Runner and Pan's Labyrinth, like that's kind of, and Godzilla, that you're getting that, right? And then I have a 2nd book series that I wrote under a pen name. And that one is, it also has Aztec mythology, but the core of the books is that it's a gay superhero. And my gay superhero, who does get his powers from the Aztecs, or the Aztec gods, I did something that I guess was crossing a boundary back then, but I looked at 50 Shades of Grey and how terribly written the book is, and yet it's the most popular book around the world. And a friend of mine, she's an editor, we were working in New York, we just said, let's write a short story or like a novella each and prove how we can write something better than that garbage 50 Shades of Grey, right? So we did it, and we set a date. And on the date, I don't know if she fell through on her deadline or what, but she was like, I lost my file, whatever. And I was like, so you don't have anything to show? She's like, no, I didn't. Okay, so that was that. But on that day I showed up and she's like, what do you have? I had like 6 or 7 short stories about the same character. So he had acquired superpowers, but I took his sexuality seriously. I was like, what would the desires of a person really be if they had these powers? And now we have TV shows like The Boys, where they explore that. That's what it's called, right?
I'm not familiar with it, to be honest.
Yeah, The Boys. So it's basically taking a look at the more human aspect of superheroes. So with my book series, which came out in 2013, I was like, okay, he's got these powers, but he's got a good job. He's a nurse. He understands intellectually that he can really help people, So he tells himself, he's like, why would I want to like dress up in tights if I already help people? So for him, what he took those powers to do for him was to actually like not take advantage of people sexually, but to live out his fantasies, which are very like 50 Shades of Grey kind of fantasies. And the series is mostly about that. So he's constantly fighting the urge or the obligation to really be a superhero, because instead he goes down into this underworld of like leather people and kink and BDSM, which is also part of some of the communities of LGBTQ people. So to explain the singlets, when I published that book series, I applied for like an opening. There's a big leather conference here in Chicago. It's been happening for more than 3 decades. It's really famous, 4 decades, I think. And if anybody doesn't know what a leather man is, like in gay culture, it's somebody that looks like the leather dude from the Village People, like all leather cop hat, leather pants. But there's these very vibrant communities that are not scary. They're just people who love that stuff and also love the BDSM aspect. And there's a really famous museum here in Chicago that's devoted just to the culture, like the LGBT culture of this. They put out an email, I remember, and they were like, we're taking on 4 authors this year. And if you get accepted, put in your application, you can have your own author table at the conference and you can sell your books. And I was like, yes, but I sent the application in expecting to get rejected. I literally did. I was like, I just self-published this. No one knows my name. I'm using a pen name, so people don't even know who the hell that is. But I sent it in, and sure enough, I got the acceptance a few weeks later, and I was like, oh my God, this is the best. So knowing my crowd, LGBTQ crowd, mostly gay and queer men though, mostly men, I was like, I cannot show up in good conscience to this conference and be in a shirt and tie and sign books. First of all, I won't sell any books. But number 2, that's not me. Going back to what you're talking about, that's not me. I don't want to dress like that. And since the books are about superheroes and the costumes and cosplay, I was like, I'm going to go into full cosplay. So I had a designer make a suit that looked like the book cover, but like a superhero suit. And then I was like, I need good merch that isn't typical merch, because my crowd wants things that looks like superhero, but like is also part of that community.
And were you bodybuilding at this point? Did you have aesthetics, like as far as?
No. I actually have the pic. You can see, everybody. You can go see on Instagram, because you can see when I'm promoting those books in there. I didn't look terrible, but I just looked kind of schlubby. And I took a chance. I was like, I'm going to do it. And so I wasn't presenting myself with that shape. But a lot of my customers and people in that conference, there's huge vendors, like these gigantic, displays where people are selling precisely those things, like singlets, a lot of like jock straps and things that, gay men want for these parties and events. And so I thought, well, could I make something spandexy, because that's superheroes, right? And I had been on a podcast as a guest, the Iron Radio podcast, which is run by 3 really well-known powerlifting, bodybuilding, like people in the field. And I made friends with one of them, well, all of them, but one of them, Phil, he makes a lot of products for a lot of the powerlifting companies in the US. And we weren't like super friends or texting all the time. He had met me and he was really nice. And I took a chance and I sent him an email. And I said, Phil, look, I just wrote my book. I'm about to go promote it. I promise you, I'm not going to put dicks on the graphics, but if I make a singlet that has a custom image that's for my books, would you make it? And he was like, I'll make anything, like we'll work it out. And so he did. And what he turned out for me were powerlifting singlets, which also were different than what was being sold to customers from competitors, like, because there are companies that just do these kinds of things for gay men. Because it was more heavyweight, and it created a better shape for men that are bigger, both muscular or like with a little bit more body.
Spanx, but yeah.
And so I started selling them there, and then I set up a Squarespace shop, and they love them. But I made a limited quantity because as a business owner, I try not to bite off more than I can chew, and that's inventory. And so I didn't have a lot of extra money, and I didn't know how well they would sell, so I made them limited run. And then people always ask, they were like, whatever happened to your singlets? Aren't you ever going to sell them again? Fast forward to 2016 and 17, when I was kicking off what became LED Queens, a Shopify store. I brought them back. I actually had two in stock. I listed them. They were gone. And then the customers just wanted more. But by that point, I actually had much more of an aesthetic for the brand, which is like 80s, neon, blue, and pink, kind of like my room here. And so the ones I make now look really different. They don't have book covers or anything like that on them. They're very like, imagine like the movie Drive, but has a rusting singlet, like all that like 80s kind of like vibe or whatever. And then the tights soon followed from that, because that's another product I would have sold for people at the conference. But even by then I was like experimenting with more sublimation. That's the process we use. And now I've launched 85 pairs of tights. So we make more tights than singlets now. And that's what we sell the most of.
Wow. So I'm guessing you're in more of a legitimate manufacturing production type of thing now, besides going to your buddy Phil and asking him to do something for you.
Yes. I mean, we're still real small. We still work with Phil. So Phil has made, he makes all the singlets now, and they're still like that top quality. But Phil has also made stringer tanks, which bodybuilders love. What are they? Silkies shorts, which army people wear. And we have a huge challenge because my customers want like hot pink, and they're really hard to make for men. So, that we're going down that rabbit hole. And then with the tights, I have one major manufacturer that I work with, and I'm pretty happy with them because they can help me reach the whole world. So it does scale. But ultimately, it's sort of like being with Amazon or some of these other services. If they change the platform, or if they change the way they manufacture one of the products that we use from them, then I'm screwed. Because if it's not the exact same as what the customers are used to, or they change a feature that suddenly doesn't work, my whole catalog is affected. And so I'm looking for ways to kind of get to, more. I would love to do more print on demand, but something where I'm more in control of the process. But I'm not there yet. I think this is a good moment to also talk about and level, about like small businesses. It's still just me. I have a few contractors who are great, but it's difficult to get to the next level because, as people will probably get, it's a niche business. We service a very niche chunk of my community, and LGBTQ communities are already small enough. So I'm trying to figure out, like, we've got COVID, we've got, shipping delays still. And I'm like, how do we get to the next place? Because I would like to make something that's even more tailored to what I want. And then there's products that the customers want that we've been promising them for years, and we cannot get to them. Like, they want swimwear right now and underwear. If I could, I would, but I'm not a huge believer in taking giant investments or owing people a lot of money. So I'm like, it might take us longer than what we expected to get to those. So right now it's the tights and the singlets that are really just, the engine. But if I could make it go further, I'm trying. But it's hard. It's not as easy as people think, where you go, oh, just shoot for the next thing and start selling it. Like, it's not like that.
I think I'm probably at a very similar space in which I'm, does this scale at all? Can I make this work? Would I like to be in this if it scaled?
That's the question. Would you like to be in it if it scales? I mean, you can take a look. Nobody needs to be a fashion guru to know that if my business scaled, we would be forced. We would have to start making more like formal black attire, because that's usually what's sold to men, black and gray. Mm-hmm. And to date, we've never really made a lot of that because we refuse to. But I'm like, and I got some advice from somebody who does, have a business. They go, oh, do you ever want to make stuff that looks a little more mainstream? And I'm like, I don't know. We would make a lot of money, but I don't know if my heart would be in it.
Yeah. Can you somehow, this goes back to things that we've said a million times in this episode already, but how do you be yourself, but also get that kind of mainstream appeal? I don't know if is it possible? I don't know. It depends. Some people do it. I suppose.
Have to be really clever. I mean, I look to the big people who did stuff like this, like David Bowie. Like he made decisions along his career where he was like, this will scale and it will fit my vision. So I look more to him and less to business people, honestly. Like David
But dude,
Bowie.
if you look into more in his career, like when you thought he was famous and rich, he was neither. He may have been living a good lifestyle, but he wasn't wealthy for quite a long time.
It all. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was
That's how
maybe
people go. Yeah.
like
Because
Thin White Duke is where maybe he started making money, or he didn't.
and licensing, by the time he started licensing so much of his music to not just movies, but video games and things like that, that's when things become lucrative. Um, and without like breaking open all my books here, like the financial books, it that's my concern sometimes when people look at social media and they look at my images, especially because I've also physically recrafted myself. So what they see is like a fantasy projected onto the screen, and they go, "Well, he looks great. He's got his LGBTQ small business. He's written books." But the reality is, in many aspects, I'm so niche that most people don't read my books. The customers we have are super loyal and obsessed with the product, but they're a unique kind of customer. And maybe my time will come later. Maybe like David Bowie, I'll figure out some way to scale what I do. But right now, just to level, I haven't really figured out how to scale. But on the surface, to other people, they go, "Oh no, this person's scaling real high," and I'm like, "No, you gotta sit in here. Like, come spend a day with me, and I'll gladly show you. Sort of like the frustrations that you can have because you want to have more money in the bank, you want to be able to have stability." And I have negotiated that away from myself. I don't even own property anymore because I used part of selling a condo that I had to kick off my own business. And it's something I don't know if I would recommend it to people. It's like the typical startup story where they go, "Oh, they put their mortgage on the line for starting the business." You can literally go bankrupt with it. And sometimes I'm that close, so it is living the dream, but there's no glamour on the other side, like behind the iPhone screen. There's no glamour here. It's just
Yeah,
work.
at least Bowie spent all his money on cocaine and limos. So.
Yeah, and I'm not doing that. I mean, I don't know, especially now. I'm not spending my money on anything. It's like video games and food. That's about it. And I'm not even dating, so I can't even spend it on men I'm going to take on a date.
Yeah, I think I guess you hear that all the time, like you said, the startup story. But at the same time, like, wouldn't it be nice to have a normal life in which a lot of times in business you start at zero and then you have to every month, every week, depending on how your business is set up, you're like, I have $0, zero sales right now. How am I going to make this work? How am I going to market myself? How am I going to make business, essentially?
There's that, and there's this really key piece which you're keen on because you have a great like outward looking platform through the internet. But business owners forget that if you're good at marketing yourself and marketing your product, and I think I've had some success with that, they're not taking into account in their accounting for the value of that time they spend. So for example, if you're a business owner and you make cakes and your TikTok account is blowing up with thousands of views, but you're spending 40 hours a week making those TikToks and not actually making your cakes, that's a deep, deep problem because you didn't take into account how much your time is worth. And so I finally, like, that clicked for me about like 2 years ago. And I haven't found the sweet spot. I have not found the sweet spot. I overwork.
For all the people in the comments asking why I haven't made a YouTube video in 2 years, listen to that back again.
It's why I retired the YouTube channel myself.
It takes so long to make a YouTube video that I was not focusing on anything that actually made money or built my business. I was just making videos, and I don't make money on videos, right? So it's at some point you have to sometimes you need to kill your children.
You have to. I basically killed almost 3 YouTube channels last year when I redid my business plan. And now what I've got it down to is, because this is part of my marketing time, my budget, how much I'm worth, my time is worth. I allow myself to stream, like actually gaming, no more than like 5 hours a week. and no more than 6 hours total producing TikToks, because those are really popular for us. Instagram's a little easier because we have more of a system now, so I don't spend all day on Instagram.
And it seems like you do a great job of highlighting your customers in your Instagram in particular.
Well, that's what really started changing it. I was also, I hope nobody ever gets the impression that like gay men are obsessed with their image. Many of us are, right? But for me, especially once I started putting myself out there on Instagram, over the years, I actually don't like putting my image out there. It's a lot of work. It's you feel burned out sometimes because you feel like people feel entitled to your image, which is very strange.
They don't treat you like a human being, even though you're not famous, you're not anything. They do not treat you like a human.
They don't treat you like a human. And so what really changed it for me, because also we were trying to figure out great ways to market our product and stay on a budget and also avoid influencer marketing. We don't do any influencer marketing. We tried it years ago, but I didn't like it because it was never authentic. And the people who wanted our product to promote it, they just want to promote themselves. They didn't want our product really, in general. And so what we do now is I actually spend a lot of time, it's sort of that researcher, like library guy. I go and look at what all our customers are doing when they're posting or when they tag us. And I have a conversation with each one. So every time that you see that image of a customer featured, I've actually reached out to them and said, hey, with your permission, could we post this because you look great? And can you also tell me about some of your fitness goals so we can include that in the caption? I gather all that info. It's very journalistic. Then we recrop the photo and do any color correction. And then we have these gorgeous photos of like the product being used in real life by real people, no influencers. And that's the future of LED Queens because it is community-based. That's where our strength from being a niche product for a niche community really comes through, because I know most of these people by name. And even if we have never met in the real world, we probably have a few people as connectors between. So that's been awesome because I don't know how y'all, but like my customers look great. Like I'm not doing any of that magic, but like they show up with these photos and they're not just bodybuilders. We have people who are bigger or,
Dude, you have like legit power lifters.
But we do have power lifters and bodybuilders. Yeah. So that changed a lot, but it was also to help me to cut down on the time I was spending on Instagram because I know how to operate cameras. I know how to edit in Lightroom. And I was spending too much time editing images of myself. So that was just like a come to Jesus moment where it was like, I was like, you don't even like doing this, like being on camera as much. Mm-hmm. Number two, it is so much work. The customers may not actually want to see your image all the time. What they may actually want to see is to see other people like what we do now. So we're kind of in a good place there, but TikTok is still like more, it's harder to handle because TikTok for now, it has to be me. The best TikToks are the ones where you're in it. So, I'm working through it, but I've put hard limits on it because otherwise I would be passed out in the other room just from exhaustion. It's exhausting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that honestly aligns so well with the last 2 years of my business and everything that's been going on. But I have Morgan Rose in the comments. She asked, has writing books ruined any of the fantasy reading for you?
A few, not too often. What ends up happening is now with, I do try new authors or current authors sometimes. But now once you see how the donuts are made, it becomes clearer to me. And this is true of the music industry and other things. A lot of people who get published nowadays, and it always was this way probably, but a lot of them, they're not that great writers. Like the books aren't that good. It's just, they got a good deal. It was timing. It was good timing on their side, or they're really good at marketing themselves, or it's part of like some franchise that they're pitching to Hollywood or whatever.
Or they pay to be on the New York Times bestseller list.
Paid. Or they're like very political people and kind of, that exists a lot within publishing. So writers will like, do all sorts of stuff with editors and agents and whatever. And so once I sort of understood that, it's made, books are still pleasurable, but I don't check out as much new stuff as I used to. One, because I don't have as much time, but two, I walk more quickly away from books now than when I was a young person. When I was a kid, or younger, I would force myself, even if I didn't love the book, I would force myself to read the whole thing. And nowadays I start a book and within the first chapter, I go, oh, if it's not like, it doesn't have to be like, Hemingway or whatever, or Shakespeare, but sometimes I can tell I'm like, I'm not enjoying this, or the premise, is not for me. So I just put it down. But I still love literature of all kinds. And there's some really great writers out there, who are still doing amazing stuff. The Three Body Problem, which is, I'm not going to get the last name right, but it's a Chinese writer who wrote this trilogy, is amazing. Caitlin Kiernan is still writing great, scary fiction. So there's great people out there. Just to answer the question, I do a little bit less reading, but I haven't lost the joy of fantasy reading.
Yeah, I had for a little bit, I was involved with a lot of different like motivational speakers, business strategists, those folks. And the amount of individuals who have #1 bestsellers or have a #1 book on Amazon, they can barely string together a couple sentences. It would just blows your mind.
Right. And here's the deal. I mean, I've said this on other podcasts, including my own. As a writer, once you really understand why you're writing, for me, even though I have these beautiful books, like, because we work very hard on the covers. I don't make the covers. We work with designers. Even though I have like 7 of them, I understand now that in my lifetime, maybe people will never really read my books. Like I just won't have a huge readership. Or maybe when I'm dead, they'll be more famous than I actually was. Or option C, which is usually what happens to most writers, no one ever cares. Like the person did it for their own satisfaction, and that's all there was. I understand all 3 options, and I think that's allowed me to like calm down, have lower blood pressure, and not live by expectations. Because especially with writing, it makes so little money for people unless you license it. You cannot expect to be Stephen King or anybody like that. It's such a rare. It really is 1 in like 3 million to become like Stephen King. So. That's made it better. And yet I still keep writing. I still keep, writing more books in the series. So that's how I know, Joe. I'm in the right lane of like passion and business for that.
Yeah, I think it's funny. You should check out more of Stephen Pressfield's stuff because he talks about that. He was a writer for 27 years before he had anything that hit, anything that made him money.
That's how it usually is.
Legitimate money. And that's writing every day. It's not that he wasn't putting in the effort.
For most writers, usually it's like their 8th or 9th book sometimes, the one that like makes the blip, like money, or gets more notoriety. The J.K. Rowlings and Stephen Kings of the world, it really is rare. And so for me, the goal isn't to be obscure or to not have people read my stuff. I'm marketing my books heavily, but even with how books are marketed nowadays, marketing for writers and most books, it's dreadful. People are still making what they call book trailers. Oh my God, that just makes me want to die.
Explain what that is.
Oh, they're really sad. Like they'll hire a video editor to make something that looks like a movie trailer, like coming soon, and they'll have like, if it's like a science fiction thing, like a big planet and whatever, and they'll be like the new book by Jesse Jones, whatever. And they're the last thing you would ever want to watch on YouTube. If you understand young people or just how people use YouTube, that's the last freaking thing you'd ever want to see to get you to read a book. Like the way that books need to be promoted nowadays, live somewhere else more in like these kinds of realms. It's word of mouth. It's meeting people in real time, providing things that go beyond the book that still bring people back, but treating them like little mini movies. They're not movies. The whole point of a book is that it's not a movie. And so a friend of mine, I'm not going to say who, but I've known him a long time. Suddenly he popped up last year and he was like, turns out I finally, lived out my dream. I wrote a science fiction book. So I was really happy for him. And a month later, he's like, here's the book trailer. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to have to respond to my friend that he made a book trailer because they're dreadful. Book trailers are made for family, basically, for your family members, because it gets them pumped about the book or your friends. But for actual readers who want to spend their money, nothing beats word of mouth for a book.
Well,
so
I've read
my book, it's word of mouth.
I read probably 2 to 3 books a month, which isn't crazy, and that's not a brag.
Awesome. You should be talking more about that. That's a rarity nowadays.
No, but I don't even know that book trailers existed. So I've never ever made a buying decision based on that because I didn't even know that they existed.
They're horrible. And it's a practice that's been in the publishing industry for like at least 15 years. As early as YouTube sort of popped up, and people could embed a video on their website, they've been around, and a lot of budget is wasted on those kinds of things. But that usually comes from editors or publishing houses that don't know how to talk to their authors to say, what other ways can you market your book that isn't creating a book trailer? Don't do it.
I mean, it's kind of like we have all the biggest in the fitness industry when we sell fitness equipment. Each one of these large manufacturers, and these are, multi-million-dollar companies, they have all these YouTube videos 2 minutes long saying, this is the Bodycraft T800. And it has 230 views. So you sell millions of dollars of fitness equipment and you have 200 views on the video because you don't know how social media works. This doesn't work here.
I'll give you a great example, but it also is an example of why I had to stop producing so many YouTube videos. Because I was really into YouTube so much, like the last 7 years. Like I thought that would be the future for me. Like YouTube would be everything to promote. And at the moment, like budgets got reduced last year with COVID. But I also looked at some of the channels, and I know like our number one video we ever made for LED Queens wasn't exactly about our product. And you could still see it now. I think it's not a lot. It's like 15,000 views, but it still brings people in, and we've embedded it everywhere on our site. And it's real simple. Because of myself, maybe it's my own confidence in myself, but also being like an LGBTQ person who is around that in the community, talking about men's packages and men's butts and wearing skin tight spandex, which is almost like what women have to talk about with wearing bras and underwear. I have no fear of it. But I will tell you, the question I was getting in DMs from customers for months, for years, it was always like, what underwear do I wear under this? What underwear do I wear under this? And so, most people are asking legitimately. And then there's a little tiny fraction of people who are like fetish weirdos who just want to engage you in that. So I know that. But when I started getting those back then, I was like, I need to give answers at scale. I cannot sit here and answer this every time. So instead of answering the DMs, I created 2 YouTube videos, which are real simple. It's like, here's the underwear we recommend. Here's how to wear it. Here's how to actually like grab your own stuff and like put it right. If you want to present, we call it, presenting. If you want to present yourself in this way. And those, that's exactly the whole point of that you're making, like understanding how social media and YouTube works. That was one instance where we finally grokked it. Because the customers still, like, I just got a message the other day. They were like, I've watched that video twice, and thank you so much for making that, because I'm not even a fitness person. What were they? They do horseback riding, I think, in some of those like tight pants or whatever. And they're like, nobody like had ever talked to us about how to do this, what underwear. So, if I could make that 100 times or make it scale all the time or have a team, the goal is to have a team that can help me answer questions like that. But people just get social media wrong. It's not, the more you talk about yourself generally is like the worse things get. You got to talk about your community or what people care about.
Yeah, YouTube's the second biggest search engine. So, that seems like you benefited there.
Tutorials and things. I'm selecting my corn snake or knowing what to do when I first brought it home. The best answers were there because I was searching. I wasn't like browsing and being like, show me pretty snakes. What I wanted was, what happens if, typical thing, what happens if it gets substrate in its mouth when it eats? I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I was like, it got aspen in its mouth. It's going to like get impacted and it's going to die in a day. Like, that's what I thought. But YouTube got me the good answers on that, including, your videos.
Yeah, it's no mistake, right? If you Google corn snake and then videos are going to pop up in like the second row of Google essentially. And of course I'm going to put corn snake in every single title because that's how I get there. And
yeah. You just have to understand how people formulate questions, because that's what the trick of social media is. What question will they have? And if you can answer it, you've got it. With what I do with the gaming stuff now, which I guess is a service of LED Queens, like I just think a lot about a 15-year-old who is maybe in the closet, too afraid to tell their parents, but they have found an escape, but a community in the video games, like playing on chat or whatever. And I go, what question would they ask, or what would they want to see because they feel trapped or afraid, to be who they are. And that's the content we make for them on TikTok. A new video game character came out just this week for Apex Legends. And the character, he looks like one of these leather people that we talked about. He's got a big fat mustache and like all this gear. And I just said, he has kind of a gay visual aesthetic or whatever. That one has, as of now, we just posted it today, 6,000 views, because it's these kids who, like, if they talk about that with other kids or with bullies, it's over. They're getting called the F word and things like that. And so that just came from understanding, like, what does my audience want? If everybody wish me luck. If I can just make that continue, then I'll be very successful. I don't consider myself a success yet.
Will you ever meld those two worlds? Maybe a singlet video game themed singlet or tights or something like that?
I've tried, and so far, the deeper I go, the more I've had to split them. But maybe the answer is
more niche, right? You're getting more and more specific.
Well, I do cosplay, right? So for the superhero books, I've done cosplay, and I used to have a channel that was just devoted to cosplay. So the answer might be in that, because kids who love video game characters love to go to Comic-Con and dress up as the character. Mm-hmm. And the same questions arise. What underwear do I wear? If I'm a guy, like, how do I put stuff here? And how do I do my hair or whatever? So for LED Queens, if we started making cosplay accessories and the bodysuits and things like that, I think that would be where the business meets the video game world. But again, if anybody here is a much smarter business person, or you got like an MBA, licensing is what limits us. Because what people want would be, they'd be like, can I get a Spider-Man costume from you and the whole look? But I don't have the money to pay the licensing to Marvel to make that stuff, and I'm not going to do it illegally. Some people do. So I think that's probably the where it meets, but I don't know how to do it, Joe. I mean, it's another area that it's also super niche. Cosplay is just as niche as like snakes and 80s colors for gym tights, which most guys don't wear tights to the gym. That's the other thing. So,
well, I think that's a little bit different now, because I know, well, I wear tights under shorts, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people do. But then again, like kind of you mentioned before, the colors I have are black, gray, and white. Yeah.
And we do have straight customers, so they do jump the barrier at a certain point, and I can tell what patterns they pick based on like wearing black previously. So that's exciting to see, because that has nothing to do. Everybody, please listen. That thing has nothing to do really with like homophobia or gender norms, or even. I really do think that they're cyclical. There's been times in life when men wore really outrageous stuff. And the last times we saw that truly was like late 70s, mid 80s. Because the men, we were dressed like peacocks, big hair, spandex, polyester, when polyester was raging, like a lot of men in like skin tight polyester bell bottoms in all colors of the rainbow. So it just keeps repeating. So I hope that with gym culture, we're kind of getting more to the point where almost all the men will be like, I'm going to wear hot pink today. And they do. A lot of them do.
Well, I mean, you would have never seen a guy wearing leggings or anything 5 years ago, but now it's becoming a thing.
Yeah, it is a thing. And for most people who are kind of more conservative with it, the styling of shorts on top, that's how they make it work. And they love it, because it does feel, the first time you do it, you're like, oh, this feels different. And people react to it. And you also feel like you're part of like, getting dressed for the gym is often like wearing a uniform. You're like getting in the mindset. So we love it. But we only styled ever one photo shoot with shorts over the leggings, and it didn't do well. We just stopped.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, what your customer wants to see.
Right. Our customers want to see the male body.
Yeah.
Right. So it's super neat. It's neat to compare. And, like I said, I go through my own troubles with homophobic parts of the culture or whatever. But it is a real joy to kind of do this because it's almost like stuff that I didn't even know I could dream when I was a kid. You know, when I was a kid, what was I into? Comic book superheroes. I loved how they looked. They also were attractive, the male ones. But there was also the 80s. So like pro wrestling and WWF was huge. And talk about peacocks, like especially the way they dressed them then. It's like the stuff I make now. I mean, back then they probably would have been like, can we hire you? Can you design for Hulk Hogan or whatever? So I'm just doing it like my way now. And I actually get
Jacked guys in little spandex underwear. I mean, jack
guys with tans and like lots of oil on their skin and like shouting at each other. Like, Jesus, that is like the gayest thing I've ever seen. And it's still the same. I mean, WWE now is the same, but it's so corporate, you know.
Isn't it funny how it's sold as like very masculine and everyone who's into it is very like almost conservative white.
Straight.
It's weird.
It is really weird. And you know what, that part, especially like pro wrestling and some other things, or even movie stars that, you know, have a certain look who are gay or maybe not gay. They start a really uncomfortable conversation for people. So I'm talking about straight men. Sometimes if you bring up this subject about how those are sort of gay iconographies or like gay men respond to them or dress like that, they'll be like, no, that can't be right. Like, you know, that's not my idea of what gay men are into or what they look like. And then I go, we come in all shapes and sizes and all flavors. Right. And you look at the 70s, but also leather culture, which comes from the 60s and 70s. It's a hyper masculine presentation that to straight men, it also feels like men going to war, men doing like the thing they do. So if anything, it tells me that we're all human. We're closer to each other and more similar to each other than we know. But it is unfortunate because some straight men really get very uncomfortable if I bring up the topic. And I'm like, it's not a big deal. You don't have to like it. It doesn't make you gay just because I think it's gay. You know? But even with these kids on TikTok, these are conversations we have to have with them. I have to have them because they'll say, how can you say that character, you know, kind of has a gay vibe to it? Like, and I'm like, well, it's because it's my personal reaction. And you may not know that a lot of gay men do like big fat mustaches and beards. Like they look like your dad. You know, like it's not my fault. I didn't do it, but you know, I guess that's why I'm having fun with what I do because I try not to let the trolls get to me, and I try to keep it educational, you know.
Yes, it's funny. Stephen Poole was talking about glam rock too. You know, you're talking about the 80s. Yeah.
I mean, glam rock was so intense. I mean, and those pants were even tighter than what I make. Yeah. So it's just cycles, and it's also a personal preference, you know. Not everybody has to dress the same way or do the same thing, but I do, you know, back to business stuff. I do need to figure out what is the future of what I do, because at the moment, you know, like a lot of small business owners, I'm like, we're getting by, we're okay, but we're not okay. I mean, meaning like by next year and the year after, how do I do this so that there's more stability, more safety in what I do? Because right now I'm still, you know, walking on the tight wire or the whatever you call it. So I just have to do my homework and become a better business person.
You and I both.
Yeah. I mean, what are your challenges right now at the moment, Joe? I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, but like now that you've heard me, my stories, and I think that my own, I always believe that the biggest problem with the business is the business owner. They're their own obstacle. And my own obstacle is that sometimes maybe I don't pay enough attention to the business stuff, even though I say I do. But like, what would yours situation be like right now? How do you think about it?
So I'll be transparent, and this is going to be probably not the best thing to say to the people listening or my audience, right? But I realize that I may have kind of fucked up with being so transparent, so out there. So the company is very based on me. And I am someone who very introverted and does not like attention. And it's starting to really, really wear on me. And I'm starting to realize that I should have set up some both efficiencies in my business that made my life easier, as well as doing some other things that maybe would be more business minded and not based on me, myself, my
Right.
image, all of that stuff, something that scales a little bit better. Also, snakes, just the amount of work that you have to do, the type of work that you have to do, and the low margins and stuff, it doesn't make any business sense at all. Some people do it, and when they do it, it's on scale, and it does
Right.
not. You're producing 10,000 animals and you're selling them wholesale to big pet stores, big box stores. Those are the people who make good livings at it. The niche people, there's a few people who carve out something for themselves. That is a little bit rare, and it's not glamorous at all. And no one's giving you health insurance. No one's giving you the 401k. No one's giving you any of these luxuries that even a normal middle-class person is going to have. So it's, what kind of life do you want? At this point, I'm working from when I wake up to when I go to sleep, because I have the day job and I have this job in which my business is very inefficient because it depends on me so much in so many different ways, and the animals and all this stuff. So it's too time consuming. If I ever have any hope of having a social life, a family, friends, any of that shit, I've sacrificed all that shit, that I need to change something drastically. And that's what I'm doing now. I feel that's what I'm starting to, at least. And it's a boat that steers very slowly, but I'm trying.
No, it feels great to hear you talk about this, because, I tell my parents, my parents are great people, and they're huge supporters of my business, but they never get involved or give me advice. So they're the best parents because they don't, get into it.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I have talked a lot about with them and kind of laid it more bare is that, especially in the last, I would say 6 years, almost 7 years, I've sacrificed a lot away. And there are things that you just mentioned. I mean, just line by line, it's love life, social life. I don't own a car. I haven't been on vacation in forever, like years. I don't mean months, like
Same
years.
here. Yeah.
I didn't buy anything for myself. I have a very nice, what would you call it? Like almost Scandinavian, decoration sense in my house. Everything's like clean lines, very minimalist. But it also helps me because I don't have to buy shit, because I don't have money to buy fucking furniture. I have a sofa that's 15 years old, and I wish I could replace it, but there's all my time and money goes into, the business and moving forward. But at this point in life, I also have to figure it out. And I think the snake was part of like that decision making of like, how do I bring more balance into my life? Because just like I'm trying to welcome more people, have a social life, date somebody, maybe have a partner. I was like, I'm even closing myself off from like having an animal. It's not even quite like a pet because it's not like a dog. And so I'm trying because my tendency, Joe, is to overwork.
Yes.
And to validate myself against myself in terms of how much I work. But usually what that ends up being, or how it turns out, is that your body takes the toll. You get sick, you have an injury. I tore my calf a few years ago, and I'm actually sure now it wasn't so much because I was on a treadmill or whatever. I think I was so stressed out at the time because everything was go, go, go back then. So I popped my calf.
Yeah. So I just had knee surgery in October. I tore my meniscus, and then after that I had a blood clot. And a lot of that was my body saying, you're not doing the right thing. What the fuck are you doing? So that was a big wake up call. And also I finally got to the point probably 2 weeks ago where I actually spent money on myself. I bought some new clothes, actually some workout clothes, and I bought some different things. I bought a reflexive bag for boxing and some boxing gloves, and decided to get into like a new hobby. Right. And I didn't hate myself for doing it. It's like my previous mindset was like, every dime that I get, I need to reinvest into my business because my business is the most important thing. It needs to be prioritized. But no, you need to be prioritized.
Well, what's that cliche line? The business has to work for you, not you for the business. Mm-hmm. And I work for, I lay it out bare now, like, especially because you're one of the few people that's brought it out from me. But up until very recently, we're talking like through now, I basically work for the business. It doesn't work for me. And I think if I'm ever going to get smarter about this whole situation, I have to reverse that because that's no way to work. I don't want to die of a stroke or a heart attack from overworking myself, and also not enjoy life, like the company of people. So.
Yeah. I mean, also a big thing was this probably doesn't seem like a big thing to you, but I turned 29 and I was like, what? I been doing this for 8 years, so I lost all of my 20s essentially. Not that I lost it. I had some good times. I did some good things, met some good people. Did amazing things with snakes and a lot of traveling and stuff like that. But I was like, oh shit, I'm really butting up against adulthood and becoming 30 and like, I need to make some moves here. What am I doing? And so that was a big thing too.
I have a question for you. You described it so well that most of breeder businesses don't really scale unless you become like a Walmart producer,
which then it takes all of the benefits of why I do it, right? Like,
yeah. So, but in the world of like, especially like food service and those things, before they get acquired by Budweiser or whatever, there's a lot of like craft beers, small breweries who they make it very hipster, right? It's a hipster experience, and you go have like your small plates and this craft beer that is delicious. Is there room in the hobby, do you think, to do that for certain customers? I think most customers wouldn't want that. They'd be like, who are you talking to? But I think there might be a few who'd be like, oh, you've spent so much effort into this animal. We're pricing it at this point because what's included with the experience of the breeder or the animal is like something nobody else could ever give you. Have you ever like talked to other breeders or considered that for the hobby? Like what?
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what I try to do, as well as Garrett Hartle, Reach Out Reptiles. He probably does it better than anyone else. I don't know. I could never put bows in pretty boxes with my logo all over it and give like the white glove thing, because that's also just not me.
Oh no, that's not even where I was going with that. I think, and maybe what I'm asking, maybe as the customer, that's stuff I would want, but something more like the listings of the animal on a website, which could include some video stuff or downloadable content or a PDF or whatever. But it would be great to actually understand, like if I'm getting this animal that's priced a little higher, like can I see the family tree of the snake?
Mm-hmm.
Like who came from, what the genes are, what is expected of the genes if the person chooses to breed the animal later on. Also, I know it sounds so dumb, but like the baby picture, like when it was hatched, like all the stuff that basically American Girl dolls did this. This is their business. They give you the whole history of each American Girl doll, and then parents pay like hundreds of dollars for the experience of it. And I wonder if there's some room in the hobby for that, because maybe it's more like me. I don't expect to have too many of these animals, but the animal already has a history. It has a history with my life, a history with my books, a history in the house. So it would be nice to know, because like the people I bought it from, the place here in Chicago, great place. But when I bought it, I was like, how old is the animal? And they're like, we don't know. It's like maybe 3 or 4 months, which now that I see the sizes, that's legit. It was like 3 or 4 months. But they couldn't tell me too much more. And they didn't want to tell me too much more about the breeder who bred the animal. And it's a great animal. It eats well. But the things that I would pay extra money for would be those things. Tell me more about where it came from. Tell me more about your history as the breeder.
Was exactly my business model. So I used to, previous years, I had a spreadsheet of every single animal that I owned, every baby that hatched out, how many eggs were in the clutch, when they hatched out, when they were laid, all of this stuff. Just when I got bigger, I was just unable to manage it all with me and the day job and stuff. And I wouldn't be able to produce enough at a price that could eke out a living. I could do it in like ball pythons. I probably could do it that way. But that's just not where my mind or heart is.
Yeah, no, that's
corn snakes are just too cheap, unfortunately.
They're just too cheap. And we've talked about like how that's cyclical, or at the moment they're cheap. They might change later.
Oh no, they're at the top of the market right now. This is as expensive as they get. People are like, what the hell is going on with these corn snakes? They're so expensive. But really,
You did say that, yeah. But yeah, then that's something you can't really plan for, because 2 years out, it might be king snakes or something else.
Yeah, and I'm
that
not
makes
willing to play the market like a lot of the full timers do, or even you're talking about that brewery. Give it 10 years, that may be out of style, and then all of a sudden, wineries are the big thing, and you're a loser. There you go.
especially now. I'm sure there's a zillion breweries who are out of business now because they used to have the customer experience to come in. And maybe they never figured out how to ship to people, or they can't
Because
do
they
it.
don't pasteurize, they don't, and a lot of these breweries are trash. Like their beer isn't great. It's just a good place to hang, and people my age like to go to breweries to hang for whatever rich reason.
Well, I think, it's not just Apple that's doing this in the world of tech, but I think that part of the future, because of COVID and how we're doing so much more like digital, like communication now and remote working, I think another thing I would be curious about in the hobby would be a service that would be kind of like a snake advisor or reptile advisor, where if I run into trouble with my animal, I can kind of consult with them and pay a fee to get like, quality advice or tips or references, whatever. Precisely because of what we talked about. There's like so much information out there that's kind of bad. Those would be kind of cool, because then it could scale. You don't have to be keeping 300 tubs of ball pythons or corn snakes in your house. You could just get on a video call and be like, show me your snake. Tell me what's happening. You could be like the snake.
Unfortunately,
head all the time like this.
The previous generations of breeders have set this precedence to where, especially the boutique breeders, have set this precedence in which a person buys a snake from you, then all of a sudden you are indebted to them forever. Every time that they ask you a question, you answer it. I have plenty of people that think they're completely entitled, without ever even buying a snake, to my advice and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I've seen that. Oh yeah.
And then also there's this very punk rock mentality that if you Brian Barczyk came out with a course, people just shit on him so hard about it.
Yeah.
I have a friend who did like a corn snake advice thing. People just shit on it because like people don't want you to see money in this industry. They just want you to be poor and miserable. And that's why I have to start a new business. I love that. I love what I do and I love what I'm doing. But at some point they all eat their own. The more successful you get, the more people dislike you. And I lose the very community that I came here to hang out in.
Well, I hear what you're saying. And, when you feel
that sounds very negative.
No, it's very negative. And one thing that I will say that I think sits above this, that actually, it's not to make us feel better, but it's actually something we can't control, is that I think that the community is structured in such a way like that. It's oppressive towards the breeders and the customers sometimes, because ultimately the society, humans at large, don't really care for reptiles and especially snakes. And so I guarantee you, if we were talking about dogs, we would not be having this conversation, because the way people think about dogs is almost like humans. So they're like, oh no, get it a sweater and send it to the therapist and tell me the whole history and I'll pay $4,000 to do this. We come from a world where like we appreciate snakes so much, and we've dealt with the dog people or the cat people or whatever, and that's fine. But it's so niche. It's so niche that once you get into that world, it's like its own ecosystem of like cultural norms. And I do agree with that. I can't really picture a way in which like the hobby will scale into the future, unless there's some disaster, like some ecological disaster that suddenly makes snakes like the most viable pet or thing to keep. I think it'll probably stay like this for a long time.
And I think media is a great way to make a living, but also you have to pop, right? You have to be right places, right time. You need to put in the effort, and you're probably not going to be the best reptile breeder, maybe not even the best reptile keeper, but you're going to have to focus on that. And there's plenty of people who have proven that, and they make great livings on it. But that's not, I thought I was going to do that initially. It just never.
This industry is just like that too. Some of the ones that have the biggest presence in the internet or with media, they don't actually make a good product, or they don't.
Right.
actually service a customer. They're just there to they become entertainers. That's what, it's closest to. And
which is fine. It's just
if that's what people want to do, that's fine.
not me.
Not me either. Not me.
Yeah.
Either. But that's the twist and the irony. Like I'm out here dancing and flexing in tights all day, but it's actually not what people would think. It's there's parts of it that of course I enjoy, but I'm going to be 50 in like 3 more years, and the body isn't something that goes on forever. So there'll come a time when I actually can't like pull it off as well. And I'm very well aware of that. So I'm having as much fun as I can with it now. That's how I think of it. I'm having a ton of fun with it now because there will be a retirement one day for that portion of what I do.
Right.
There's still more to go. I mean, I think, especially in one thing about gay communities is that there is more of a better sense of like people aging in a different way. So you do see a lot of men in their 60s and 70s with like amazing bodies. And I'm like, I hope I can do that.
Find yourself a good hormone doctor.
Well, that's also that. I mean, that's why I love podcasts, because we can like get into that. For straight men or gay men, I think so many people are on HRT now, and there's bigger discussions that are more open about that. I think it's just like legalizing pot and things like that. We should get with our legislators and see like what can be done for all sides of the equation. People should take a vote, referendums, because I don't think those things are always harmful. I don't take steroids, but I am on HRT, so that's through a doctor. It's like
it's just a legal version,
and it's a legal version.
Yeah.
So I mean,
right?
Yeah, and it does help. It improves your life a lot.
Yeah.
But for those of you who wonder about HRT, it's not like a magical thing. Like I don't look like Bob Paris back there on my wall. I look fit for 46, but it doesn't like If you want to look like that at 46, you have to buy the illegal stuff on top.
Yeah, and diet and dehydrate yourself. That'll help.
That too. But for physique stuff, I'm working really hard right now. Even though there's no events to go to, whether it's Comic-Con or conferences for my business, I'm setting goals because I want to make sure I have fun creating a shape.
Yeah. So Dominique in the comments, she said there's a great LGBTQ friendly reptile group on Facebook. Not sure if you've chatted about it or seen it, but it's a great community.
I'm a member of one of the biggest corn snake groups in Facebook. I mean, it's thousands and thousands. That's the only one I'm a member of, and it's fascinating.
In all the
there's a lot of
ways, bad ways.
I mean, there's honestly sometimes there's just sad stuff because you really see the mistreatment that is either taking place for the animal or will take place. So those just break my heart, but there are little diamonds in the rough, and sometimes certain reptile owners they'll give you great anecdotal advice or anecdotal input, and so it has had its place. In general, though, I have to like cover my eyes sometimes when I go into the group, but I'll check out the LGBTQ group. I wonder how it'll be different. I wonder.
It's
I feel like snake stuff is very universal. I never think about sexuality when I'm in there.
It just seems that snakes are dominated by a certain type of person, in which isn't very inclusive and isn't very diverse.
Yeah, I guess I could see that.
But corn snake groups are different because it is very honestly, the base is a lot more female. The base is there's a lot more feminine energy to it. If you go to ball pythons, you're looking at meatheads, people who are not exactly cool with everything. It's a little bit different.
Now I get what you're saying, and I could totally see that because even just in regular life, I had somebody came to service the air conditioner the other day, and they were like, "You have a snake or whatever," and they were like talking about like the ideas they have of like what a snake owner is, and they're like, "Yeah, it's like a macho kind of dude with like lots of tattoos and stuff," and I mean, I think if anything, the only place I fit in with that is the shaved head, maybe. But I see what you're saying, and then this goes back to the situations I've been in with TikTok and these young gamers. See, for me, I'm just lucky. It's a combination of like nature, nurture, my parents, culture. I'm not afraid to walk into spaces that are not welcoming of gay people. I really am not. So if I got invited to a thing and they're like, yeah, there's a bunch of homophobes at this thing, I'd be like, I don't care. I'm going to have a good time. But I forget that in my community, some people, really feel put out, or like it's a shock and trauma. And so I do need to check out that group, because I might meet some cool people who, I'd love to talk about the hobby with them. But my main people to talk about the hobby with are generally, who is it? It's actually with people who don't have one. Like my couple of friends from college and things like that. I'll be like, here's what they ask, what's the snake doing? And I show them. But
yeah, Dominique said it's LGBTQIA reptile keepers and enthusiasts. So that's the name of the Facebook group.
Noted. I'm gonna go check it out. I'm excited to see what it's about. Because it is a whole world unto itself. I love it. And there's so much more. I feel like I'm learning every day from this animal, no matter what happens. Constant learning.
We all are. And if you're not, then you're probably doing it wrong. And that goes, for everyone, every step of the process. I mean,
and lifestyle, you're thinking about how you want to craft your life going forward, not just balancing things, but, how do you want to make money? Do you want to travel? And so for me, I hope I do the right thing, but at some point, my snake will probably be in a 60-gallon or 70-gallon tank. So even just to double that, just to have 2 of those size gallons in my house, people think it's easy, and they go, "Oh, you just stick it in there." And I'm like, "No, I want to make sure I do it well for the animal and for myself, and that I have a lifestyle that can match up to that." Because I think 1 is easy, especially without kids and stuff. Like, I can handle it, but 2 might actually be more complex than I even realized.
I think you got it.
All right, good.
I
love my snake. Good sheds. It's getting longer. It's not underweight. It's not overweight. So just keep rooting for me, because
well,
people get pulled into it. They want to overfeed it and things like that. But no, we don't do that here.
Yeah, it's important to also not overthink it, right? You're doing good. It's doing well.
The animal's smarter than you. All these people worry about, like, I see, so many people asking, it doesn't want to come out, or it's been, I don't see it. What happened? And as long as you have a gradient, I'm like, this is what nature is. Like, in your house, if you get too hot in the front windows because the sun is there, what do? You go to the back porch, like, to cool up. Like, it's not any different. But that's just from observing it and, reading. So I don't know.
Yeah, you think a snake's like, hey, what is this giant ape doing? Let me check out. They're nervous. They
don't have hair or sweat, like sweat glands. If it did, then it could just kind of hang out like in one spot, but they don't have that. So they have to move in order to help themselves. So it's really fun.
Yeah. So give me a little bit about, what you're doing now, the future of everything, and where people can check you out.
Great. The way the year looks ahead for LED Queens is to continue what we're doing. And that's basically to showcase the lives of LGBTQ people in a way that just hasn't been done before. Like we live in such a celebrity culture. And it's like, gay actor and gay whatever, gay congressman. Okay, great. But what really matters is day-to-day people, like the guy who's a barber at the end of the street, the FedEx driver, and that they're focused on fitness and that they're part of a community. The goal is to keep highlighting them, but then also release more products this year that just, they're happy with. And so I'm coming up with the theme for what the collection will be this year. But if anything, you'll just see more of a refinement of what we do. If you visit the website, we work really hard on the user experience. So we don't even do a carousel or banners or things like that. We just show you the products. We go, here's a grid of 90 products. Here's the best stuff we got. And that's where we really spend our brain time, is to create a great user experience. So that's that. I've got 2 books coming out. So book 3 in the coil is coming out, and that's the one that has more snakes than before. It has these mythical giant snakes that even fight each other, kind of like Godzilla. It's really great. And I do have one more How to Kill Superhero book, which may or may not be this year. It should be this year, but again. And you can find those all through my website. They're also on ledqueens.com. So my website is cesartorres.me. And then there is one wild card, some big open question, which is, I don't know if I can call it a service yet, but whatever it is that I'm doing through TikTok and Twitch to provide a validation for queer, gay, lesbian, and women gamers, because some of them are straight women who feel put out by bullies. Whatever I'm doing there, that's like a direction I'm going in, but I don't know exactly how it fits in the business. It is part of the business now because we do rely on like Twitch subscriptions to do that. But if y'all want to check that out, it's real simple. It's LED Queens on Twitch. I stream twice a week, and I'm on TikTok also. So that's the roadmap for now, Joe. But as you know, things can change drastically based on politics and climate and the virus. So it could look really different in just a month, but that's where I'm at. And if anything, I think what I would say is with the product, with LED Queens, we're focusing on just keeping everything that we do as classics. So the catalog is always available. We're actually not retiring things. A lot of brands, they'll take away like the thing you loved. Do you hate that when they do that? They go, this was my favorite pair of glasses, and then it's gone forever. We're actually doing it in reverse because we're so niche. We're leaving everything that customers want and just continuing to make more of it. And that's different than how we were handling it before. We used to get rid of products or take them down after a season. So that's where things are at. And I'm also just enjoying my corn snake. His name is Mictlan, which is the name of the underworld of the Aztecs. So that's where all souls go in the afterlife. And he's a hypo snake. So he's orange and yellow and just beautiful. So my goal also for the year is to just, have him have a good home and grow really huge. And I guess that's my goal too, just to have a good shape and get huge. There you go.
It all aligns so well.
Yeah. You learn so much about their nutrition, like even for humans, like, I mean, people with dogs probably know this better, but now I go, okay. I mean, I do a good job of managing my body fat, but I'm like, oh, this is a lot easier once you have a pet. You know when you're overfeeding them what they look like and how it can damage their health. I'm like, I better just do this with myself. Don't overeat. Just keep it just what you need. There you go.
Yeah. I know fit people with fat pets. I know overweight people with fit pets. It's funny, so man.
I'm trying to make them both align. He's more fit than me right now, technically, but I'm trying to like become more like he is because it's their biology is just, that's a whole, I could talk for 4 hours just about what I learned about their nutrition, like their digestive system. Like I still don't even know how they do it. Just mice. And then they have these robust, beautiful bodies. I don't get it.
Yeah, and just the usage of calories in their body. For someone who's doing bodybuilding, when calories are there's so many people who count their macros and stuff like that. It's very interesting.
I mean, for what I do, and I don't do it professionally or anything, but I'm eating all day and it's real precise and it's constant calories. And with these animals, I know, like, especially because I know macros of my own, like a mouse, it's only a certain amount of protein, but yet they eat that once a week and they're able to build more muscle faster than a human. So they're optimized for this, but they also just don't move. That's the idea of it. They're just sitting in there all day, like not moving. So.
And they're one big muscle.
Yeah. But then you see how much strength they have. I remember when I got the baby, the second time I ever handled him in the house, again, I was terrified. I was like, how is this thing so strong if it's so tiny? And so they are a wonder of nature, as are all the animals, but I'm just glad that I chose to get one because it really has been, just inspiring. But he's doing well, and I can't show him to you today because he got fed 2 days ago, and I usually wait almost 3 days.
You might as well. When you have one animal and you have that choice.
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not? And then that gives me more handling time with him. But you just get to know their patterns, like when they poop and all that stuff. So it's real good. But maybe next time we talk, who knows? Maybe I'll have a second one because I really want a second one. So if anybody who's watching, like any of the viewers, if you want to suggest a species, send them my way. Right now, I would love either a corn snake or a Mexican black king snake. But
have you been bit yet?
No.
There you go. We got to get you a king snake so you can get baptized.
I think a king snake would be good. I do want one animal that will at least mistake me for food.
Yes, that's the perfect one.
Yeah, I'm in because now I'm not terrified of the animal itself. Even even if he were to bite me, like it's not a big deal because I see the teeth now. But I'm telling you, I here's the thing: when I actually brought it home, I had actually never handled a snake, even though I bought it.
Even
And
in the store, you didn't handle them.
the owner, she brought it out and she showed it to me, and she's like, "Oh, isn't that great?" And I was like, "Yeah." But I just took a bold leap. I was like, "I think I can do it." And the first 2 months were real awkward because I just, I was like, I'm going to kill it or it's going to kill me. And the second time I ever fed it, I don't know how oh no, second time I handled it, it wriggled out and was going down like I have a bookcase. It was going down into the wall because there's like a little hole that goes into the wall where the television stand like is drilled into it. Terrifying.
Yeah.
They're just, I love those stories, but the rest has been pretty smooth, and a king snake would be great. I'm okay being bitten.
There you go. You got it.
I mean, I hope I'm delicious. That's my only hope, that I just taste good.
All right. And as for me, you can check out portcitypet.com, have a bunch of animals and products available. Please go check out our sponsor, Focus Cubed Habitats. They're doing amazing, functional, and with amazing forms and really, really interesting, very forward-thinking enclosures. The best enclosures and customer service. I know Carly, my friend Carly, just reached out today. Cage manufacturers, they never get back to you in a decent timeline. They always take 6 months to ship you out things. This is not the case. Ashley gets back to you, and it's her, right away. And they work really hard. They're doing great stuff. So please go check them out. She also just dyed her hair like purple pink, and it's really fucking cool looking. So go check out. They're all about making enclosures fun and having fun colors and different things going on.
We talked about them last time when you were on my podcast, and I really have my eye on them. And again, back to being a business owner, trying to figure out like how can I save money for this thing, because they would be great. One of those.
Yeah. It's one of the only aesthetic looking reptile enclosures that aren't just a black box or a fish tank.
Yeah, and I would love that. It would fit my aesthetic, but we'll see if it fits my pocketbook.
There you go. You have the purple and blue type of feel going on. You could.
That's what I would love. I would actually love that because I mean, this is like the gayest story, but like when I was looking at the two, because it was two corn snakes that day when I was going to select it. And the other one, now looking back, I know it was Annery, because the owner, she was like, it's black, but now I know it's Annery. And I just remember thinking, I was like, I mean, I love the one I got, but I was like, oh, because he's orange and yellow, he will look great against all these other colors, which would be teal, purple, green. And I was like, for photos, to show family and things like that, this is going to pop like nothing else. And so even now for an enclosure, I'm like, well, what enclosure would just make him, showcase those scales? That's where I'm at. And it would be those colors like purple, blue, green. Anybody who's a redhead knows this. Those are your best colors. If you wear clothes, you have red hair, it's purple, blue, green, teal, so that's where we're at.
Well, I need some advice. I don't know these things. I don't know my complimenting colors here.
Yeah, just let me know, because I do this for my customers too. So I'm always glad to help people out, because there's just things that just never work. Like black and red, people think it'll always look good, but there's very few people that can pull it off. Objects, yes, like a race car, yes, like some Corvette, whatever. But black and red is very difficult to pull off. So anyway, anytime you need that color.
Straight men are lost in this world as far as what to wear, man. You'd be surprised.
Well, a great way to learn it is by becoming a photography nerd. Because once you do that stuff, then you're like, oh, the blue sky will always work with these other objects. And anyway, but you don't have the time for that. Your focus is the next page in your business life, getting more of a life, and then also just doing more cool snake stuff. So I don't know.
Get a life. I like that.
Me too. I mean, I can only tell you that and joke about it because I'm trying to get one too.
Yeah.
It's easier when I was in New York. Now that I live here, especially because I started the big part of the business here in Chicago, the last almost 5 years, no life.
And it's such a good city. There's so many things to do, so many people. Yeah.
It's amazing for the arts, for music, street festivals, and if you're a gay person, it has one of the best gay lives, LGBTQ like scenes in the world. But I was making donuts. Well, I was making.
Have you been out here to Philly?
Only once when I was living in New York. I went to visit friends for the weekend. Gorgeous. I almost thought, I was like, how much would a place cost here? I want to live here.
It's gorgeous in its spots. It has its,
Well, I think when you visit, it's gorgeous. When you live there, it's like a different story.
It has its areas.
I liked it. Very East Coast, like the architecture, everything always feels like the East Coast.
Has that filth to it.
Which I like. I actually
Chicago's pretty
like that. I miss the grind because Chicago is very clean. I gotta say.
Yeah, not like some parts of New York and stuff like that, and Philly or filth.
No, the stories about rats in New York are true. You see them every single day, way too close. I was walking with a friend, and we were just in a park, like a public park, beautiful, Manhattan, like Sex and the City kind of garbage. And a rat walked right over her foot, and she was wearing sandals. And not a little rat. It's the kind you would feed to a boa constrictor. It's like it walked over her foot. So that I don't miss.
That's just a day in the life of a true New Yorker, I guess.
That is a life. I mean, I was just throwing out my garbage. Every time I threw out the garbage bag, I really was scared to death that a rat would come out, because they do.
Have you seen that the Morgan Spurlock Rats documentary?
Yes. Oh, it's good. It's really
good. That's all about that.
And I know I keep like chatting more, but out of all the animals in the world, like spiders don't bother me. Insects I'm pretty okay with. Snakes clearly I like. But there is one animal that will make me scream like a child and get on top of the table, and that is rodents, like live rodents. This is why I'll never feed my snake live rodents. I cannot. They have to be frozen.
Yeah, maybe don't get a ball python then.
Like kryptonite. Yeah, maybe not the ball python. No, ball pythons, I mean, I will say no disrespect to them, but they are just too mellow for me. I do need something with personality who on occasion may have to bite me. That's fine.
Yeah. For me, that animal.
I've only had him 9 months, but now when I pick him up in a full coil. Like, so I pick him up, he doesn't squirm or wait, and he wants to just stay. He's even taking naps, just like sitting there, like coiled up. So I'm like, is this what he's going to be like his whole life?
They only get more comfortable, more accustomed to you.
But I think a different snake to have with a different personality might be fun. That's maybe a little feistier would be good. We'll see.
We'll get you a carpet python or something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more like aggressive looking than the aesthetic.
Because the ones in my books, I don't have it to show you, but I'm really inspired by vipers and rattlesnakes, because clearly, like the Aztecs, those were the snakes that they put in their artwork. But the way their eyes are, I mean, they look angry. Like, I kind of want a snake that has that look. So.
Now I want to, and I know that we're totally we were trying to do an outro here, and now we're getting all types of carried away. But
I don't want to like send it off the rails. So if we got to go, we got to go.
Oh no, I wanted to show you. You got to get a jungle carpet or something like this.
Yes. Well, I've seen you have one on your channel, right? Isn't that the one that's always biting you?
Not necessarily. Mine have always been pretty cool.
You were like, I gotta watch out because it's gonna want to get off the hook. Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
That kind of like angrier face. That's what I want. That's beautiful. Those colors don't even look like nature made. They look like man made. That's amazing.
I mean, that's the thing. These animals start like brown and black in the wild, but we've line bred them over time, over years, and now they're like blazing yellow. There's even some that are a little bit neon greenish.
How difficult are they to keep?
They're very easy. It's pretty much like a corn snake. People are going to hate me for saying that. It's just different temps, just a little bit warmer. Oh, look, there's the carpet right there.
Do that. If it's just warmer, yeah, I can definitely do that.
Yeah, and honestly, they always eat frozen thawed, and they're not very particular about their conditions or their food or temperature changes. This is my buddy Tony of Selective Scales. He actually breeds green tree pythons together with carpet pythons.
Beautiful. Are they very alert? Are they the kind of snake that like is constantly tracking or looking at you?
Very sensitive to heat, so they will. Yeah, if you're breathing on them, they will notice.
Got it. Oh, that's because they have pits right on their face.
Yeah, so if you see here, these are all heat pits.
All the heat pits, and then they have the eyes that I like because the ones we
Vertical
put on my
pupils.
book covers is the vertical pupil. Yeah,
Could be you.
that really could be. I think you've started something.
Yeah, more aggressive, still easy to keep.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I feel comfortable enough with that only because of what's happened so far with this one. Where, yeah, I just feel bad for some people. I've actually seen people talk about. They're like, I've had my snake for 3 years and I'm still afraid of getting bitten. And I'm like, it's not. They're not that bad. It's like like a suction cup with a couple of like Velcro pieces on it.
Just depends what it is. You can get some.
And I have no intention of getting the big ones, y'all. I'm not getting a Burmese or the big stuff. I just need something that fits my life, and that might be one of them. They're beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's put a bow on this one. Cesar, thanks for hanging out.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Go check out my podcast with him if you want to hear more snake-centered stuff. We talk plenty of business. Hopefully you guys don't mind if I keep on doing these kind of hybrid-y, maybe not even 100% snaky, just having fun and talking because I enjoyed this one.
It was great. Thank you so much for having. It's an honor because I've seen everybody who's been on your show, so I was like, me? Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Thank you everyone for watching, and I will catch you hopefully next